All right. How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to the stream. We're going to be having a little bit of fun today. Looks like this is the first time I actually get to see the Lost Relics, and I know it's covering it right now where my face is, but I get to see that new notification. I didn't actually know that all the text was going to appear. It looks pretty sick. I'm not going to lie, I like it a lot. So hope you guys are doing good right now. Today I think we're going to have a really interesting one. Ooh, Breezy just went live too. There you go. So it works. The notification system definitely does work. We are today going to be covering a few little things. I think I actually have everything ready to go. So I might be doing a little of this. Let me see if there's any. Make a purchase at the Emporium. Chop some wood. Produce some potions. We could produce some potions really quick to get this thing going. Crazy Fro has jumped on in. How you doing, Crazy Fro? Good to see him. Yeah, bro. We still got a good. We got some crazy stuff going on, but things have been going good. So I'm glad I got a little bit more time now to be able to stream a bit. Let me see what I'm gonna go make some potions really quick before we get this stream started. While you guys are jumping on in. How's it going, Ghost Car? Good to see you, my friend. What potions are we making today? I guess we can go with some peach foil. Yeah, let's go with some peach foil. Let's just go. Resources. Let's go resources. I think it definitely uses this one. And we need some peaches. I hope you guys have been having a little bit of good luck while you've been streaming. Where are the peaches? I guess it's the consumables. There they are. Peaches, and then what was the last one? It was Osk foil. Perfect. Go make these potions, bottle them up. I really love these peach foil potions. They just are so value. There we go. But yeah, I'm excited today. So there's been the thing with me is lately has been doing a bunch of homework, in my own time, especially like during work hours or when I'm driving in the car, listening to different podcasts, getting ideas about what's going on in the metaverse, what's going on with crypto gaming. Obviously the general idea here right now is that we're in a bear market. Had some like crazy news come out about inflation and CPI ticking up, both of them meaning that the government's probably going to be increasing interest rates. And not just here in the US, but all over the world. We've already seen it being taken place. So I think right now is a really perfect time to kind of catch back up on where we're at, since we're in the bear market, now's the time to be like assessing about like what were the things that went right during the last bull run? What were the things that went wrong? What did we learn? What were the mistakes? A bunch of things that we're going to be able to cover in general. So I came across a couple of YouTube videos and a couple of articles that I've been doing some homework on that I thought would be really interesting to watch with you guys while we do a little bit of grinding, provide a little bit of content for the Lost Relics community and anybody that's watching on YouTube. If you want to do me a favor, jump on over to YouTube real quick and go ahead and hit that sub button, or on Twitch as well. Give me a follow and we'll be bringing you some good content, I hope. Don't know how long today's stream is going to run. Hoping to get through 2 videos, but I know depending on how in-depth we get into some conversations, we might have to cut it down to 1 video because both of them are pretty long. Well, I believe about an hour each. So I think it's going to be some good times. Give us a little ability, give some time to grind. I think that's everything. I don't see really anything else on the map. Give us a little time to grind while we get a good conversation in. Any of you that are lurking in the background while you're going for those blockchain items, feel free to keep the stream on. Of course, the video on demand will always be available so that you guys can listen in at a later time in case you have to dip out at any point. Let's go ahead and purchase a feather really quick so we can complete this one, which I'm sure is just what everybody's doing. All right, got my feather. And let's clear this, claim this, claim this. All right, so we need to chop some resources. Breakables on adventures, completed adventures, gain some XP. So chop some resources is probably the only thing I need to worry about there. We'll go ahead and run probably Wastelands and then jump on over to Mount while we do some of these videos. So I'm going to go ahead and deposit this, get my good loadout out. and we'll get this show on the road. So this first video that we're going to be going over is going to be a talk from GDC, the Game Developers Conference. And this talk happened roughly about, I believe it was the end of August, middle of August, August 15th or so. It's a good talk about just crypto gaming. Now, what I enjoyed about this video is that I always like to get, you know, both sides, both perspective, right? You can be like ultra bullish on Web3 gaming and ultra bearish. I think this is a really good middle ground because, you know, obviously if you're speaking at the Game Developers Conference, you need to know your audience, right? And we've heard about a lot of Western pushback against NFTs or play to earn or, you know, Web3 gaming, however you want to classify it. Even the concepts of like pay to win and all these things. So, you know, the audience is going to be a little rough, and I think the speaker here, William Robinson, did a really good job of explaining or like understanding that it was going to be a little bit bearish there on that in the discussion. So it sounds, you know, his tone comes across a little bearish, to be quite honest. But regardless of his tone, you know, the content that he says and the things that he brings up are really good points that we could talk about. So we're going to go ahead and get this thing started here. And Coco's jumping in on the stream on YouTube. Thank you, my friend. When's the next interview with Cliff? Hopefully Cliff gets a little bit of time, you know, in the near future. I'd love to have another conversation with him. Honestly, I've been the one that's probably been going a little crazy in terms of work and everything. So, you know, make sure to reach out and hopefully we can get something going. I'd love to ask him about all the new things that have been happening and how players have been adapting and everything. So let me go ahead and get this camera going, and so we'll go ahead and be able to pull it up here. So that way, if you're watching the stream, you'll be able to see it in a little side clip. But like I said, the title of this conference discussion was how Web3 games work, and then in parentheses, and sadly don't. And we'll be pausing throughout the video just where, you know, we come across some interesting topics to go ahead and discuss. Feel free while you're listening or lurking, if something piques your interest, go ahead and type it in the chat, and we'll make sure to go ahead and cover it. So I'm going to get this thing started, okay? Here we go. Let me jump into the adventure.
So my name is Will Robinson. Today I'm going to talk about Web3 games. For me, that means games that use NFTs, blockchains, decentralized ledgers, smart contracts, cryptocurrencies, etc. I've designed this talk for people who have heard about these things but haven't been behind the curtains, so to speak, who haven't seen what the industry is like and would maybe want to know why people are motivated by it and where things are going. It turns out that most people in this space are interested in lying about it, so I'm hoping I can give you some truths at least. Before we begin, I'd like to make it clear that despite me working in crypto for 4 years, I have empirical data to say that at least 97% of Web3 projects are misguided, malicious, or broken. And the ratio is even worse for games in Web3. So just want to make sure that I'm not here to red pill you.
Empirical evidence.
In fact, hopefully I'll convince you not to make a Web3 game because it's either too early, too dangerous, too expensive, too criminal, or too evil to bother. Instead, I'm going to give you some mental models to think critically about what's going on and let you know what I think people in the industry would rather keep secret. At the same time, I want to highlight towards the end of my talk how there are some interesting potentials that Web3 has offered, at least one game community, which has done some beautiful things.
That has to be Axie
fully
Infinity.
Open source, it has no token, it has no venture capital, has no carbon footprint, and it values the labors of its community in really interesting ways. And it uses blockchains to actually dig deep into the affordances of the medium, and so I'll be happy to talk about that later. So in 2017, I completed my doctoral thesis in game studies. I focused on how rules incentivize people to enact stories. I worked on feminist, Marxist, post-colonial critiques of games, in-game items, and mods and modders. If you want to follow me on Twitter, I'm Danger Will Robin. If you want to check out the website and the project I'm working on now, it's called alliance.xyz.
I definitely am going to be checking out some more of his work for sure.
My dissertation, I'd already decided to leave academia. I was building a career as a forensic crypto auditor, which is a pretty strange thing. I was actually doing it in an accounting firm.
Yeah,
and
baby.
You might think this is a radical shift, but for me, I was
Nope.
still chasing the same rush that game designers chase, which is that I'm addicted to twist endings. I know this is cringe, but ever since watching Richard Kelly's Donnie Darko at age 16,
Great
I've been
video,
obsessed
movie.
with twist endings, and I've been setting myself up for surprise by the media I consume ever since. Almost anyone who's ever designed a game knows that they are especially suited at bewildering even their makers. So games are almost like players in themselves. They lead players down garden paths. They have players evolve dominant strategies that are new and unexpected and unforeseen. And we usually call these second or third order effects. These higher order effects are table stakes for people who think about systems and for systems designers, trying to get your initial conditions, your incentives just right so that your system reaches some interesting experience. Well, that's a maddening ordeal. And so Bitcoin is totally along that track. And I know you've heard of it, but maybe you don't have a good mental model, so here's one that I like to have. It's a spreadsheet. That's all it is. It's a spreadsheet. You can reduce the number in your cell to increase the number in someone else's cell. You're not allowed to reduce anybody else's numbers, and nobody can increase numbers unless they decrease their own. That's the game. It's like soccer. If everybody plays by these rules, something fun emerges. And what was interesting is that these numbers were, of course, meaningless at the beginning, like points in soccer, right? But because the sheet runs, regardless of what you do to it, can't be stopped by governments or by corporations, it has an intrinsic value to have a number on this sheet. And so you'll pay to have someone reduce their number to increase yours. And it turns out that...
Okay, so that's perfect. Let's cover that really quick. So just right off the top of it, he starts off by giving his background a little bit. Obviously, he's, worked on his thesis as a doctorate program in game studies. So that's really interesting to me. Definitely would like to read up more on that end. And I think he starts at the perfect point, right? Like obviously working as an auditor or as a, in my perspective as an accountant, this hits like directly home with me because I understand a lot of the items that, his background, very closely matches mine other than working in academia. But what I think is the most important part here is that he starts where you have to start if you're going to do any type of homework on this. It always starts with Bitcoin. It always starts here, this idea about the ledger that he's about to go through in greater aspect here. But just to give a little bit of background on the accounting part of it, right now he says it's just a ledger, right? It's just a database that's keeping this information, that's keeping track of information. The thing about that is when it comes from an accounting standpoint, is that it's the first time in history where we have pretty much invented what we've called, triple entry accounting, which is where you're recording what's flowing in and flowing out at any time. And also it can be referenced across users. So if you and me are doing business together, if I were to sell you a product, the triple entry system would be that I sold you X item for a certain amount of dollars or crypto. You purchased that item and paid that crypto. It all happened at a certain time, and we can verify that it happened between each other. And that's never happened before, especially the part about verifying that it's happened. In the past, if you sold an item, the business would have to keep track of what they sold. The customer would have to keep track of what they bought. They would almost never reconcile 100%. So that means that there's errors all around the world of everybody that's trying to keep track of this ledger, because your ledger doesn't match my ledger, and we have to make adjustments to make a match, and everything has to balance out in terms of numbers at the end of the day. Now that system is guaranteed. So we know with 100% fact that through this new technology, that is accounted for. So that's really the genius behind what was created, and has so much bigger implications for business and what it can mean. So just to give you that little bit of a background while we continue on forward here.
That Satoshi Nakamoto's intellectual contribution was that this is only possible if you waste energy. And if everybody agrees to take the ledger that provably wastes the most energy, well, then you get a censorship-resistant currency. We'll talk about why you might want that later. But the problem being solved here in the cryptographic framework is called Byzantine fault tolerance. If you want to Google it later, the Wikipedia articles are very interesting. But if you do waste this thing, and if at least less than 50%, like if any owner owns less than 50% of the wasted energy, then you have a credible, neutral system on which you can rely that it will behave the way the code says it will. And you want to remember that for later, because that will be helpful for thinking about games. And so because it was making this funny money, it was a pyramid scheme. It was just people computer playing in their basements.
I don't like the term pyramid,
coders,
but okay.
Pariahs, people who
in some cases, yes.
were made
In some
fools
cases,
of
no.
for thinking Bitcoin was real. It was faking it until it made it, basically. And I think of Bitcoin as like an entity, like another player, like a game that plays itself. It has its own personality, its own agency, and not just a player, but I think of it as a devil. Like you can sell your soul to it, and it will empower you with
Bitcoin
wealth
Maximus.
and riches, like Dr. Faust. And I actually think of it more than a devil. I think of it as a Lovecraftian elder god. Something that like cultists in the 1920s in New England are like throwing shit in the reagents into like a cauldron to summon something terrible that might give them power, might enslave them.
A little much on the hyperbole, but okay.
And the reason is because it creates value, Bitcoin, for people, captures that value and redistributes it. It pays its followers, right? And those followers then proselytize. They go on and they say more and more and more Bitcoin everywhere.
The concept that he's talking about right now is pretty much the idea of the growth of a network state, or of what's called Moore's law, or I'm sorry, not Moore's law specifically, but like the way the different types of ways to be able to value a network in general. This idea of the amount of participants that are within a network, time times the square root of the amount of activity that they do on that network. The general concepts about how to value a type of network. So that's the value that he's talking about, that people find that derive from Bitcoin. And obviously, in many crypto projects, if you're part of the network and you're supporting the network's growth, you're obviously working in your favor and reaping the rewards of ownership of that network by also helping other people realize the value that it could bring to them as well. And it's the same type of content that you would use for any business, right? If I'm running a business, I want to make sure that I'm providing my customers the best value, the best value at the most efficiently that I possibly can, which is the same type of concept here, just applying it to an actual network.
And it works. It's a self-perpetuating philosophical object. And you'll want to remember that too. If a bunch of people hold the same asset, they will coordinate to increase its value. That'll be helpful for Web3 games later.
Just human
here
nature.
You can see that Bitcoin did exactly what it was supposed to do. A censorship-resistant money allowed foreign powers to fund an internal terrorist organization or revolution in Canada, depending on your side of the argument. And we won't debate that here. But essentially, this is like the native, beautiful possibility that the Bitcoiners see, right? So at the moment when 2008 happens, the crash occurs, and the government, instead of punishing the banks, prints more money to bail them out. Basically taxes everybody who's holding dollars by saying your dollars are now worth less, so I can give some money to the banks to make the banking system not collapse.
Right,
instead
exactly.
of doing something else.
Quantitative
Satoshi
easy.
Nakamoto gets very angry. He says, this isn't a very good thing to do. I'm going to create Bitcoin. But more than that, like imagine if things got really bad. Your government became despotic, all-powerful, could check your credit cards, could freeze them. As soon as you want to resist that government, which has now massive surveillance because it's the future and surveillance is easy and free, well, how are you going to resist this super government? And so for the cypherpunks who are building Bitcoin, they're
Not
trying
just
to come
the
up with
cypherpunks.
a money
Many
outside
countries in the world.
of normal regulations. And so we make Bitcoin to resist government, to be illegal, to be a criminal object, like by design.
I wouldn't go that extreme to say, pretty much criminality is pretty much what, there's definitely ways to operate within the current laws in any system as crypto gets adopted. But I guess the point he's trying to make is just that if it is against the will of a government, then it is inherently criminal. That just is the nature of the beast. It just depends on what government we're talking about.
And criminal is not always a bad thing, right? Like in a terrible government, criminal is like actually the good guys.
Yeah, exactly. Stopped it a second too soon.
How they see it. And so Bitcoin becomes this like reliable code that anybody can depend on, just like TCP/IP, like the internet protocol, right? It's a standard, we can follow it. And this is one more thing to remember for Web3 games. You're building something that's reliable, right? A layer protocol that everybody can build on and expect to behave the way it was set out to. No one will have the power to change it. Okay, just as a side note, these cypherpunks, although they had these like noble ambitions to like, stop despotic governments, they do come from a pretty creepy place of like anti-Semitic gold bug world. And if you want to read more about it, I recommend David Golumbia's book. But the same with the Lovecraftian cultists, just because they had intentions and ideologies and politics doesn't mean that the thing they eventually summoned had those same politics and ideas, right? The games you design don't do what you want the games that you design to do. They have a life of their own. Okay.
Especially as new people adopt it and ideas start to change.
The banks are unfairly supported by government central powers. Vitalik Buterin is upset because World of Warcraft has nerfed his Warlock. The Warlock had a Drain Life spell and Siphon Life, it was called, and it was removed.
Yeah, I played Warlock as well.
And his entire build was ruined. And I think he jokingly said, though it's not clear if it's a joke with Vitalik, that Blizzard had way too much control over his game. And then set on a long course journey, just like Satoshi did to neuter government, to neuter game developers, to make them subservient to their games.
Well, he's speaking to game developers, so you got to frame it in that case, I guess.
It takes years. He eventually comes up with a new cryptocurrency called Ethereum, and instead of being just a ledger with plus and minus numbers, it's a global computer. Every cell can be a program now. And a bad computer, like a really bad computer. Like imagine the whole world sharing one Palm Pilot, bad computer. That's what we're after, because it's hard to get the whole world to agree to one computer state. If anybody tells you you can get the whole world to agree on a very large state, you can probably say they're lying. Like they're part of the camp of liars, or they misunderstand their own technology. You can't get a decentralized view of a large state right now with our technology. Okay, so in this sense, you could imagine putting the rules of World of Warcraft on the computer, not run World of Warcraft on this computer, and then sign off on them as like, these are the rules, nobody changed them. Now, any game designer will tell you that's untenable. We need to evolve and adapt our game. Heck, even chess has patch notes every 400 years, right? So
yeah, actually, I think I just heard there's a whole bunch of drama in the chess community right now. Some new like 19-year-old player just defeated Magnus Carlsen or whatnot, and there was a bunch of drama about whether that player cheated or not. I think he had a history of cheating online or something like that. But interesting that's the same time that this discussion's been happening.
To think that it would make sense to keep a game stable wouldn't be ideal, but instead think, how would we get a community to govern those rules, to decentralize that ownership of the game? And that's where Ethereum is going to sort of try and propose this benefit. So all these cells, like we said before, computer programs can be anywhere. The owner can be the program. It can own its own programs. The programs can own money. This is a novel shift for most people. Programs owning money is weird, right? Imagine a self-driving car that charges you, and then it takes its money and it goes and it pays for gas from a gas filling terminal, and then just is a virus, right? The car makes enough money, it makes an order itself to a factory to make a new car, and that car shows up on a boat, and it starts making its own money. You could conceivably think of protocols living on their own in this.
The crazy new era we're going into.
And so the first major use case for this supercomputer machine was just to create mini Bitcoins, right? Every cell became its own ledger, a program for another split up of tokens. And that enabled this ICO, the initial coin offering boom of 2017.
Oh, the good old
days.
Where
we could once again do criminal activity with crypto. In this case, the criminal activity
take it down a notch.
Wasn't subverting governments in revolution, it was subverting the SEC. So the Securities and Exchange Commission, right, has clear rules on how you can tokenize your company. Usually it is through stocks and through regulations. I was an auditor. I can tell you the list of regulations is very long. It's very expensive to make a stock and to get people to buy your stocks. But what Ethereum did was permissionlessly.
Okay. So I have to comment there for sure. This guy was an auditor. I believe he worked for a big four accounting firm, which is one of the largest accounting organizations in the world. Bigger than the largest law firms in the world. Major players across the board, if not the major, the greatest in terms of financial information. But So, first off, the idea here about criminality and that like you're subverting the SEC. Okay, I understand where he's coming from. In general terms, you can make the argument. However, the counterpoint that I would bring up is that I do not believe that a majority of cryptocurrencies are easily able to fit into the box of the SEC and the rules that were written both back in 1933 and 1940. We're trying to adapt this new technology that has pieces of being a currency, pieces of being a commodity, pieces of being, an asset of being property, and with the ability to also change its state during its existence based on different types of protocols or smart contracts. So like the fact, making the comment here that it's clearly right or clearly wrong, I just can't agree with that whatsoever. There's just not enough information. There's not enough regulation. There's not enough information from government, from private owners, from developers. It's just too new. It's too new. The technology is too new, and we don't know the limits to its power and or its impact that it will have on the world. As a crypto enthusiast, I guess you could say, I definitely believe that description will be significant. I do believe that it will be changing the world. But I don't think it can easily fit into any of the laws that had previously been passed. In some cases, yes, maybe. In most cases, I would definitely say no. So we definitely need some more clear guidance. And, I think we're going to have to, unfortunately, in the United States, be getting this guidance through court cases. So when we make the comment about something being illegal, I would come back and say, hey, in the United States, you're innocent until proven guilty. So without any clear guidance on, what is right and what is wrong, we're left to guess, which is where he starts to bring up the topics about like risk. Like it's extremely risky to operate in this space. Like how do you pay taxes? How do you report your income? How do you, are you meeting, financial standards like anti-money laundering or KYC or any of those issues? Where's the line, So I think these things are going to start getting to start be playing out in court. We'll get some more guidance. We're definitely going to get some more, laws from Congress, and also laws across the world. Different government bodies all over the world are going to be giving their interpretations. And I can tell you now, this is going to be a trial by error, where there's going to be hundreds of laws that come out, and only a handful of them will be correct, and the other ones will need to be updated or replaced, or threatened to leave countries behind because they're not adopting the newest technology to compete with the world. But it is what it is. Right now, I think the biggest news from like a week ago was that Coinbase will be backing a lawsuit for 6 of its customers that got added to the sanctions list related to Tornado Cash. This is the first time that we've seen the OFC, I believe it is, the first time that we've seen them actually enter a piece of software into that ban list, into that sanctioned list. Whether or not, there's clear precedent that like software is speech. So where's that line? And that's the argument we're going to be having in court. So I definitely push back on that comment. I would strongly disagree on his perspective. Then again, if I'm speaking to a group of game developers who are generally against the idea of cryptocurrency and or NFTs in games because they're in the Western, for Western audiences, then I can see where, that might appeal to having them pay a little bit more attention. I don't know to what degree he believes in it, but obviously he, if he's coming as an auditor, as an accountant, most of us are trained to be extremely conservative. So, risk taking is not an area that we like to proceed. But somebody needs to lead towards the future, and we're going to just see how it plays out. Ezekiel's jumping in on Twitch. Thank you, my friend, for jumping in. Let's go ahead and continue, and we'll comment going forward.
Let you buy stocks. You could just say, these are my stocks. And you can buy them here, and if my company goes up in value, these tokens will go up in value, which is very dangerous. A lot of people got sued by the SEC. I don't recommend anybody do it. And the thing is, people aren't used to having that kind of financial access. We weren't growing up in like schools that trained us to buy stocks directly from the source companies.
Oh, it's
right?
even worse than that.
Brokers who make sure that we're not drunk when we buy our stocks very often. Or even Robinhood gets in trouble when it puts fireworks after you buy your stocks. But here, like, we can gamify the heck out of stocks. We can do whatever we want with stocks. No one can stop us, except when eventually you find out who you really are as a real person, and then you go to jail. So people lost their shirts and more. Contracts broke. Contracts were like lying, et cetera, but a tiny percentage of the ICO boom produced what we call today decentralized finance. We invented how to swap tokens, how to get loans and leverage, and basically rebuild the financial sector. In crypto, here are the top 5 as of yesterday. And you can see, like, Maker did the first thing we needed to do, which was a stable coin, put USD on the chain. Aave, lending, that lets you basically borrow against that USD, so you can leverage up or short positions. These are just sort of fundamental pieces, building blocks.
I hear you, Ezekiel. Don't worry.
System.
You're good.
Those were built. And by 2019, we have this great financial system. The fees are way lower. Like, if you're trading on Coinbase, it's 10 times more expensive to make a same trade, but we can only have 7 trades per second for the whole world to share. That's the Palm Pilot again, 7 trades. Visa does 40,000 transactions a second rate. Oh, it might be 15 trades, but it's really bad.
Yeah, you're comparing technology that's existed for 25
that
years
was the good news.
to
No more brokers, no more
10
middlemen.
years.
The bad news is we could now have like drunk 12-year-olds with an internet connection taking leveraged long positions on pictures of cats. Right, that's the financial system that ended up being built, a crazy casino.
Well, and also to be fair, I mean, his point isn't incorrect. Like, that with that freedom comes the ability for a lot of things that were previously, how do I put it? Like, the government or institutions were previously not allowing you to be able to do some of these things, and now that anybody can, we're going to get some weird permutations. And that's rightfully so. That's going to happen. And to go further on his point about, financial education, like, it's worse than like not being trained how to buy stocks. Like, people aren't even trained how to, like, you don't really write checks anymore, but like how to balance their checkbook, in order how to be able to reconcile the differences between their bank account and what they've spent, what they have coming in, just basic financial education. How do you figure out what your net worth is? What are assets versus what are liabilities? What is income? What is not income? These are areas that, like, we've had Supreme Court cases to help us decide some of these topics. And even the decisions of these topics are extremely vague when we come to the description of, like, what is income. So, it really just depends. But the key point here is people aren't trained. There's no class in school to teach you these things, right? So, like, if some of you had, like, I was fortunate to have, like, an introduction to business at a very young age, then some of this comes a little bit more naturally to you than it does for others, and that's unfortunately going to be a learning curve that everybody's going to have to go through. And it really started in 2008, right? Like, when we started to have this financial collapse all across the world. Right now, that was when everyone started even questioning the idea about, like, what is happening? Where are we? Why is this happening? Why isn't anybody going to the jail? And having to learn. Now it's going even further, because now we're talking about, like, what is money? Right now, with all this major inflation that's come out with from what the central banks are doing, people are questioning some of the things that we've just assumed have been, guaranteed part of life. But we're no longer in that world, and that's what's causing these conversations to happen. And at the same time, this new technology is literally redefining what it is. People are learning about all this for the first time. We're all learning something new every single day. So, financial education, you keep hearing about in crypto, like, people don't understand. You just don't get it. People always say, you just don't get it. Well, it's true. Like, it's not about like that you don't have the capacity to learn. It's just that some of these topics are very important topics, very fundamental in nature, and have been changing compared to like the previous 100, 200, 300 years of of economic existence, I guess you could say.
Right, and the knee-jerk reaction here is like, well, we got to regulate this, but it's unregulatable. That was the point. We created this elder god that gets to enslave us now. It cannot be censored. The sort of cognate, I would say, is it's kind of like discovering peer-to-peer sex, right? So we had brokers, these priests.
Okay, weird analogy.
Go to them, they'd let you have sex with one other person, only if that person was like a different gender than you, et cetera, et cetera. And then we found out we can peer-to-peer sex, and we did a lot of it, and it was messy. We had lots of sexually transmitted diseases. We had unwanted sex. We had sexual assault. We had unwanted pregnancies, et cetera, because we didn't teach anybody about how to have peer-to-peer sex. We haven't taught anybody how to do peer-to-peer finance. And so people are getting all kinds of scams, money's lost, et cetera, not knowing what they're buying. And so that's the situation we're in. Probably can't stop peer-to-peer sex. You probably can't really stop this either. You'll only get to maybe educate people out of this problem.
Going back to education again, but like let me take that a little. Let me try to clean that up a little bit. Like I wouldn't have phrased it that way, peer-to-peer sex, but let me try to clean it up a little bit. Oh, that was a really good run. I didn't even use anything. I should probably change my loadout whenever I come into Thornbirth. But okay, I think the key point here, and the reason why he brings up the idea about church and priests and peer-to-peer sex, is because a previous time in human history that we can easily refer to as this idea of the separation of church and state between the Church of England and the Roman Catholic Church, and this idea that the government and religion should be two things that are separate, kept separate, to allow for individual freedom, to allow individuals to choose, how they practice their religion, what they believe in, so on and so forth. That same type of concept, that world-changing concept, is the same. It's within the same realm as this idea with crypto, which is the idea of the separation of money and state. Money is fiat currency is something that is being controlled directly by governments across the world, and through that government is where these fiat currencies derive their value. The question that's being proposed is, what would happen when you separate that power from the state and allow the money or the value to be something that is determined by the people, to allow people the freedom of choice. So I can see an analogy there. I would have put it that way rather than this idea of peer-to-peer sex. But I get it. It makes sense to where he's coming from. I just don't know if it sounds the best to an audience, but it is what it is. Let's continue.
Okay. Then, at the same time, we're creating NFTs. So this is where we get to the sort of game side. The model is different. This is like one cell in that Ethereum sheet from before. So a single one of these cells here, one of these programs, looks like this. And an NFT is very simple. It's an array of numbers. And it's not even an array of numbers, it's just an array of slots. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and the person who owns that slot. Alice owns slot 1, maybe Bob owns slot 2, and then they can trade. All you're allowed to do is say, I own this slot, and I no longer own this slot, I give it to someone else. That's the rules. In that smart contract, you usually have one website link. It points to a service that'll hold a JPEG. And if you own slot 3, that means you own JPEG 3. If you own slot 5, you own JPEG 5. That's an NFT. That's all there is to it. There's a way to hash that file that's on the other server so you know that it doesn't change. And then all of a sudden, you have the capacity to move objects.
That's the key, right? Like, regardless of how you want to describe it as being part of, a general ledger or whatnot, the key is that now digital items all across the world are obviously able to be, or not obviously, but can now be reliably moved from person to person or from place to place through the blockchain, which is something that has never happened before. Because in the past, we were always simply creating copies of files, going back and forth. But now we can create unique individual items, obviously, to be able to apply this new technology to the world. And Nico's jumping on in saying hello, and Grind Radio salutes you. Thank you, my friend. Hope you had a good stream. I've definitely been able to check out sometimes when you stream. So keep up the hard work, keep doing what you're doing, and let's keep going with the video.
We tried to, in 2017, as a crypto community, to make a game on chain, and we ran into that 7 transactions per second problem. You can't crashed Ethereum basically with this thing called CryptoKitties, which was just a way to like breed cats on chain that looked like they wore sailor suits or different fun, cute things.
CryptoKitties, 2017.
These objects inherited like this art status. Some of the early ones today maintain Veblen status, like a way of showing your wealth. They also avoid a lot of SEC regulation because they're artworks for personal use a lot of the time, and I'm not your lawyer and I'm not your financial advisor, and everything I say you can't take me to court about, but basically, a lot of very wealthy people moved their capital out of DeFi when regulations started getting hairy and into NFTs. It was a place to do more regulatory arbitrage. This time it was less criminal, but only because no one had ever thought to regulate this kind of thing. And so NFTs became this stand-in, this new shelling point, a place to store value. And the OG ones, like the CryptoPunks here, they're worth hundreds of thousands of dollars each. And you think, well, why? It's just a JPEG. But it's more than a JPEG. It's a coordination tool. In the same way that Bitcoin is just a number on a spreadsheet, this is the first NFT. So it is the obvious place to store value and acts as a social coordinating mechanism. People can then, look, if you're starting
So one thing here, obviously, so I don't believe that CryptoPunks are actually the very first NFTs. There's been a lot of discussion about the topic. Regardless, it is the first one that got like mainstream awareness. So, points. I'll give him a point there for that. Oh, here we go. We got another demon. I guess I have to bust this out then. Hold on real quick, ladies and gentlemen. He is immune to the mist of deception, but if I can kill him away from other people so I don't split the damage, that's exactly what I'm going to do. Okay, here, and he's gone. Okay, we continue with the video here.
A new venture capital firm, or you're an old venture capital firm and you want to like raise money and then invest in crypto projects, there's no way they'll take you seriously. But if you buy one of these things and make it your profile picture, all of a sudden you show your commitment to this industry and to this idea. You're ready to put your money where your mouth is, and so they act as a kind of social signal. Social signaling is so valuable.
Extremely
valuable.
valuable.
And they're $100,000, but they're resellable. So it's not like you lost $100,000, you just lost the time value of that $100,000 and then took on exposure to the price change. Okay, so NFTs come out, they're very exciting, people are very interested in growing them. We have this model of many people owning one collection.
I would also like to comment about when we go about NFTs, NFTs are really the commercialization of digital objects. We've had selling of video game virtual items, since the dawns of the MMO genre. But this was the first time that that buying and that selling of those digital items actually reached mainstream appeal, at least to some point in degree. And now, we are definitely nowhere near the peak, but this was the moment where crypto could be more than just financial applications and be commercialized by the idea of selling products to end users, right? Like right now, the basic economy is the buying and selling and trading of goods and services. So originally we had the idea here of services, which was DeFi, borrowing, lending, staking, gaining a yield. But now we have not just services, but goods, which are these NFTs. So the economy of crypto took its next leap forward, going from a single cell to a double celled organism type of type of logic.
And we talk back about Bitcoin. When people like own a lot of one asset, they can coordinate to grow its value. They all become shillers, shilling each other's bags, coordinating around them. Today, or only a couple of days ago, I believe there was like a $450 million deal for an NFT collection company to basically come into existence and compete with brands like Hermes, because the community owns the brand.
I actually don't know what Hermes
in a way that's
is.
totally new and novel.
Anybody in the chat help me out?
And evades regulation in interesting ways. Okay, so now we've got NFTs. They're exciting. Axie Infinity. The NFTs start to become useful. They're being played with in games. And again, the game is not on the blockchain. What happens is I connect my wallet to an account, and that account looks at the blockchain and sees that I own something. And by own something, it sees my address, address at slot 3. It looks up what slot 3 is. It's that, not CryptoKitty, but Axie. It's an axolotl on the left, and it populates it for me in game. It's a database lookup. No logic is put on game. I win some games. A centralized company called Sky Mavis then goes and prints some tokens to my account, right? And it does that printing on chain. That's the model of the Web3 game that's super successful. Axie Infinity here had a valuation recently at like $60 billion.
Huge.
It's like a mobile game, right? It looks nothing like any $60 billion game you've ever seen.
To be fair, I mean, we're kind of heading down the road where like all the biggest games in the world are going to be mobile. I know, we keep having this discussion about like how games are changing and what that means, and people are resistant to change. I know. But at the end of the day, the numbers just bear it out. There's more people willing to pay money in these ecosystems you're able in the mobile genre, you're able to reach out to a much larger audience. Games are able to be much bigger. It's just, this is the path we're going to. The numbers don't lie. It is what it is. Like whether or not we like it, whether or not the quality is there, is really a different topic. But, so Axie Infinity, I think not only hit the crypto trend, but also hit a mobile trend too in the conversion of AAA gaming.
It doesn't play as well. Its community is very different from most. It's almost entirely based in the Philippines and the global south, because when you play this game, you get those tokens, and those tokens have values, and that value can be higher than what you can do, working in one context or another. And people here misunderstand why this game is valuable. They think it's valuable because it's somehow revolutionized play to earn. You can now play games and earn money, and we've solved capitalism. Absolutely not. People who believe that fell prey to a very terrible pyramid scheme, and the value of Axies, the value of this company, have all plummeted since the curves of growth have not mapped on to the flood of inflation in this game. But what this game did do is millions of players with no banks all of a sudden using Axie as the front end to DeFi. Using Axie as the front end to the blockchain.
Oh yeah, this is a very, very, very important point because, and I'm not gonna lie, when we were going through Axie, I never jumped in Axie personally, and I actually this 1 week ago, for the first time, went to go set up a Ronin wallet so that I could check out Axie. Obviously, I've seen a bunch of videos and paid attention to it and everything, but I haven't actually played Axie. So I was going to do that this weekend, and unfortunately, I got called away in the middle of the process, so I actually didn't get to finish that. So it is what it is. But I do think that the important point here is just the idea that Axie in general, during the time of its creation, when Delphi Digital was coming out and helping them with their economic model, the truth is that at that time we really didn't know how it was going to play out. The part that I was the most concerned with was around the scholarship programs, not because I think that there's anything wrong with people earning a wage playing a video game. My thing was just how is this something that you're going to be able to roll into the traditional world, right? Because like in my mind, the growth of a metaverse or the growth of like what crypto gaming potential is this idea that people will be able to come and go in a digital space and be able to live a portion of their lives, whether that is the working inside the metaverse, or whether that is playing inside the metaverse, or whether that is socializing. So my thing here was that, hey, any crypto game that really does explode, and Axie there for a while, we had to have the conversation about, like, is this the one? Was all about that. It was all about what would Axie become. And now that with the benefits of hindsight, we can understand that the inflation of SLP was too much. The economic model of always having people come in was built, like a pyramid scheme. I don't think it was meant for that intention, but just it really was copying, user acquisition growth that any software company would, which would be, how do you acquire more and more users? How do you become, the Facebook of today? How do you build a Facebook of today? It would be the same type of logic. Until people understood that the value that they received, and this is the key, the value that they received from playing the game exceeded what it would the value you would get by playing any other game or by doing any other type of work. And by that, what I mean is that if you cannot find a job that would pay you above $2 an hour in certain impoverished countries, and you were able to find value in this game that could provide you double that, then that's something that could stand the test of time. It all comes down to what type of value you bring is the game providing, or are the players providing, or are the developers providing. It all comes back down to value. The value added. And this is where we start talking about, like, obviously games as a business. So where was that value? We could make the argument with Axie that the value was entertainment, just like the video games of the past, which is a perfectly legitimate argument. The only thing is that if you want to compare it, if you want to say that it's entertainment just like the games of the past, well, games of the past have a very clear growth trend. They hit their game launches, they hit their peak at about 2 to 3 months of launch. The users of the game then drop off to about remaining the remaining 20 or 30% of the players that started when the game came out. And then new DLC or new patches come back that bring the community back, and so on and so forth. But every single game has never created an economy that has lasted the test of time. Obviously the big ones, being conversations about RuneScape, about EVE Online, about EverQuest. Every single one of these games has had a point of which it reached, maximum potential, but then has drawn back and fallen off. But the question was, is Axie what was different? Because we have this new technology that allows us to do more things than the games of the past previously could do. That was really the conversation that was being had. And let me make sure to just kill these guys because I am low on health. But let's get this video going again real quick.
Axie isn't on Ethereum. It's on its own chain called Ronin. And the people who own Ronin are the people who made Axie. And Ronin has its own currency exchange called Katana. And the people who made Katana are the people who made Axie. And when Katana takes a fee, Axie's taking a fee. And so what you have here is a $40 billion game project, but it's a loss leader to a neobank. It's a new way of banking people who've never had access to banks. The promise of Bitcoin was to bank the unbanked. It turns out.
Let's go back a little bit here. I'm going to go back like 30, 40 seconds because this is key. Because this really is talking about that value that I was just saying, and like what is the value that games bring out, at least the games that we've seen so far. What is that value? And I've proposed it before when we've been playing Lost Relics. Like I've asked players, I've asked OGs, I've asked new players, I've asked the top of the leaderboard, I've asked a lot of people. I've asked even Cliff or other developers like Mitch from Million on Mars, and talking about like what is the reason that people play the game? Like, why do you play? Why are you doing what you're doing? I would venture to say that most of you are playing Lost Relics because the concept of you being able to find a NFT that drops in a dungeon that you can resell is a very promising idea. You like the gameplay and you enjoy the grind. You enjoy the hunt. You're hunting for blockchain items, and the rush that you get when you find one. That's legitimate. That is valuable. The question is is it valuable enough to sustain an economy for years and years and years and years and years of time? That's the key. So right now he's gonna continue going back. He's gonna talk again about the value that Axie brought forward and how to understand what that value is.
Got NFTs, they're exciting. Axie Infinity. The NFTs start to become useful. They're being played with in games. And again, the game is not on the blockchain. What happens is I connect my wallet to an account, and that account looks at the blockchain and sees that I own something. And by own something, it sees my address at slot 3. It looks up what slot 3 is. It's that, not CryptoKitty, but Axie. It's an axolotl on the left, and it populates it for me in game. It's a database lookup. No logic is put on game. I win some games. A centralized company called Sky Mavis then goes and prints some tokens to my account, right? And it does that printing on chain. That's the model of the Web3 game that's super successful. Axie Infinity here had a valuation recently at like $60 billion. It's like a mobile game, right? It looks nothing like any $60 billion game you've ever seen. It doesn't play as well. Its community is very different from most. It's almost entirely based in the Philippines and the global south, because when you play this game, you get those tokens, and those tokens have values, and that value can be higher than what you can do, working in one context or another. And people here misunderstand why this game is valuable. They think it's valuable because it somehow revolutionized play to earn. You can now play games and earn money, and we've solved capitalism. Absolutely not. People who believe that fell prey to a very terrible pyramid scheme, and the value of Axies, the value of this company, have all plummeted since the curves of growth have not mapped on to the flood of inflation in this game. But what this game did do is millions of players with no banks all of a sudden using Axie as the front end to DeFi, using Axie as the front end to the blockchain. Axie isn't on Ethereum. It's on its own chain called Ronin. And the people who own Ronin are the people who made Axie. And Ronin has its own currency exchange called Katana. And the people who made Katana are the people who made Axie. And when Katana takes a fee, Axie's taking a fee. And so what you have here is a $40 billion game project, but it's a loss leader to a neobank. It's a new way of banking people who've never had access to banks. The promise of Bitcoin was to bank the unbanked. It turns out we're going to do it through cute axolotls on a mobile phone app. You can't even get this app on the App Store. You have to download the APK. It's like there's a lot of friction. But the sense here is that games right now in Web3 are acting as loss leaders. Games on Web3 are strictly less fun, and they are strictly more expensive to make, and they have more friction for their players. There should be no reason a Web3 game standing on its own merits would be better than a Web2 game. What they offer is...
we all can agree there, I think. In other words, as Web3 gamers, as crypto gamers, you are having to go through extra steps of difficulty to be able to play these games that that don't exist in traditional gaming. You know it's true. I know it's true. And it is one of the things that has been getting better and better and better. Like when we look at Lost Relics, for example, previously you were having to send in purchasing items or transferring items out of your in-game wallet. You have to create the wallet, transfer it out, place it on Nginx, pay the gas fees, make sure that you have the engine available to make the transfer. Then transport it. Either leave it in your wallet, or transfer it out to relist it, so on and so forth. These things exist, but they exist because the technology is just so new, and we all know that to be fact, right? And this continued growth will continue to happen, right? And the same thing, again, going back to Lost Relics again, that worked for a long time. We were doing that just fine. The market was going good. Back when I started playing Lost Relics, and when I was purchasing items, the market got up to a peak of 250,000 engine transferred daily. It's transferred daily, transferred monthly. And so if you were to calculate that out when engine hit its peak at, I don't know, forgot what the peak was, maybe around $5. You know, that's about what? That's about $1.25 million per month. And that was just inside Lost Relics. That was just Lost Relics by itself. So the economy at Lost Relics was transferring about $1.25 million of value in any given month, right? Now, what's interesting is that if we were to apply the amount of engines sold at and also give it the evaluation of its peak, and that wasn't at its peak, right? That happened for multiple months while engine was at 50 cents, at $1, at $2. You know, I don't remember specifically when it happened back in time, but obviously since the information is all available on the blockchain, you can go back and see. You know, so the economy of Lost Relics hit this high point, and then we also hit some low points, right? We hit, you know, when the Easter happened from a few years ago, broke the game for a few weeks. You know, that obviously caused people to either take some time away or sell some items. You know, obviously the economy came down. You know, now we're starting to have some more current issues with JumpNet, right, from Engine, and the issues about transferring items in game, tokens in game, I should say. Through JumpNet. It's an issue that's going to continue to happen. My guess is that it's happening right now because Engine's putting all of their time and their attention into into Efinity on the Polkadot network. But it is what it is. You know, obviously these things are going to continue to improve. It's going to be 2 steps forward, 1 step back. It's just the nature of the beast, just like gaming, was in general. Remember going back playing. We did multiplayer on GoldenEye, couch co-op, and now we're doing multiplayer, 100 and 256 person lobbies for people all across the world, So it just, as technology advances, so will the ease for gamers.
A new way to monetize players through banking. And the problem is there's a lot of regulatory uncertainty here. So doing it is very dangerous. You have to be comfortable with a lot of risk. But if it works, you can disrupt much more than any game industry. Okay.
So in other words, the risk is high, but that means the reward's even higher.
These aren't really games, right?
I wouldn't say that.
They're marketing, they're user acquisition, right? For players to then have wallets who have access to all of Web3 and all the fancy, regulatory bank business. Now.
Okay. Let me. I know we only went a minute and I'm already stopping again. I'm sorry, guys, but I have to talk about this. Okay, so the point I think that you should take away from this is just that what is the purpose of the game and what is the value that the game creates, and I think it's twofold. At a very basic level, when he talks about monetization of players, like we're all being monetized when we play games. Either you pay the $60 or you pay for free, and then you buy a battle pass or you buy, a cosmetic skin or whatever. Like games need to make money because they're businesses to be able to create more content, to keep the game going, so on and so forth. But how you monetize and why you monetize is something that's very important, not only to your customers, but to the company. The argument he's saying here is he's saying these are not games. That's wrong. A lot of these are games. There's plenty that are not, for sure. I mean, we can have an argument all day about what a game is and what a game isn't. Going back, if you go back to the social media days with Farmville, like people were saying those weren't games. Cookie Clicker isn't a game. These like hyper casual, business simulators where you run your own little cat restaurant on your mobile phone, that people say that those aren't games. Like games are games. It is what it is. Candy Crush is a game. I don't care. It is what it is. It's hard to define, but the purpose of with blockchain games, what he's trying to say is that the purpose of these games isn't to try to derive value from the actual game itself. It is to be able to bring new people in as a form of advertisement, to be able to monetize you through the creation of a wallet, which is true. There's when I think about it right now, I think some of the biggest crypto gaming organizations in the world right now. You have, obviously you have Engine, engine with Lost Relics and all the other games in the metaverse are all about bringing people into their mobile wallet, where then in the past, we don't have access to this anymore. In the past, you were able to access DeFi, you would be able to trade, you would be able to do all this. That was the service they were providing. For customers and for developers, they made it easy for you to be able to integrate NFTs into your game through Unity plugins, through APIs, and for players to be able to get you onboarded into this new ecosystem, which is crypto. And because you are in this system, you are significantly more valuable because you're going to be trading currencies, you're going to be buying stuff, you're going to be promoting the brand of Engine, you're going to be doing all of these other services like swapping, like trading, like listing, all these things that bring value to Engine, but also give you value as a customer, right? This is how... Engine's not the only one. WeMix is doing the same thing with games like Mir 4 and all the games that are coming out under the WeMix platform. The idea is that you have this main head corp company that is owning the main token. That token is where all of the value tends to flow up to, and that is how they create value. You think this is likely the same thing that's going to be happening with GameStop, Loopring, and with Immutable X, which is Immutable X will be doing the what's the word I'm looking for? Will be the one that's producing these games, acting as a publisher of different games that GameStop will be listing on their marketplace, and Loopring will be providing the transactional wallet value creation because players that create this new wallet will then be able to trade currencies, be able to trade NFTs, be able to do whatever within this GameStop ecosystem of these three different companies. Axie's doing it with Ronin, so you can see that this is a model. Gala is doing it with their Gala nodes and all the other games. They're all trying to create these ecosystems that once they get a player in, that player is very valuable. They then monetize that player, which then lets them create more stuff or do new promotions, so on and so forth, to keep the value going, to keep the business cycle going. So very key point. That is what is happening right now. But to go back and step further, how did this all, what was the original ideas when CryptoKitties was happening? How did people visualize what blockchain gaming, what the value blockchain gaming was going to be? Okay, the old arguments, which I think are still true to this day, but they were much more prominent back in the day, was that a game developer can monetize their players in a new way. Rather than the company, rather than the ecosystem like the Xbox, the PlayStation, the Engine, the WeMix, rather than that ecosystem, the actual developer of the game would be able to monetize their players by being able to take trading fees from buying and selling items in their game, in their universe. And if that's the case, then that means that the company is able to sustain itself in a different manner than it ever done before. You don't have to charge, if you don't want to, you don't have to charge a $60 fee. You don't have to charge, for cosmetics. You don't have to do, these, force your players to view ads while they're playing. These were ways that old companies, Web2 companies, were creating value, but this doesn't need to be the case. It still can be, but it doesn't need to be the case. That was the old model. That was the old logic that I still think is true today, but has taken a back seat, I guess you could say, to this new, creation of an ecosystem that goes beyond one single game. But it is what it is. We also saw the adoption of guilds, and we'll get into crypto gaming guilds in a bit, I'm sure. But let's continue forward here while he talks about Web2 gaming and how they're trying to take advantage of this new Web3 technology.
Web2 companies like Ubisoft have tried to capitalize on this NFT movement. There's a lot of excitement around owning the objects you have. But I technically own the objects I have in my Steam marketplace. I bought a Dazzle skin recently. I main Dazzle on Dota 2.
Dota 2.
And that Dazzle skin,
I'm playing Dawnbreaker right
API.
now.
It's an open API. Anybody can read that I have it. You can display it anywhere you want. It's basically as good as being on a blockchain. And I can sell it on the store. And the fee for selling it is 2 pennies. The fee for there's no crypto fee lower than 2 pennies. So The benefits people will say is true ownership, but like, I don't know what that really means. And other than saying, tomorrow Steam could turn around and turn off its services. They could kill the Steam store.
Yeah, I mean, that's the key.
Your blockchain items were in a smart contract, theoretically that could be possible that it wouldn't be turn offable. And theoretically there is value capture there. So I would say that this is like really a stepping stone. It's a way to also get players to start connecting their wallets to companies. So they can have your ID and your on-chain identity and your on-chain like financialization. There's a benefit there for sure long term. On the ESG side, because I know we talked about how you have to waste energy for Bitcoin, I just want to be clear. This was on Tezos. That's a different blockchain. It doesn't use proof of work. It uses a totally different consensus model. This did not cause any carbon footprint. It was really annoying to see that being the major critique against Ubisoft.
Yeah, so many wrong critiques.
Also, the majority of blockchains today don't have proof of work. It's too expensive for them to get proof of work. Instead, they use things like proof of stake. Instead of wasting energy, because you have to waste something for your blockchain to work. Instead of wasting energy, they waste the time value of money. You lock up your money, its time value is now in jeopardy. That's what we're wasting, not energy anymore. And Ethereum, which is proof of work, will be merging to a non-proof of work system very, very, very soon. So
I think it's one day away, people. One day in a few hours
ESG,
or
when
less.
there's all this other terrible shit going on in Web3, would not worry about that. And ESG is about the environment side, just to be clear. So yeah, Celo, Algorand, Cosmos, Polkadot, Solana. Don't worry about ESG, worry about other things. Okay, so I promised I'd get to like why Web3 games are cool, what I like about them, and where there's some possibility for salvation. This is a screenshot from my favorite Web3 game. In fact, I started an entire decentralized autonomous organization to play it. It's called Dark Forest. And it's an open source game. And what I think is possible is that you can make open source a profitable endeavor for all the people who want to contribute to the same code base, no matter who they are or where they are, by paying them using Web3. And by making that copy of open source valuable. So in the same way that Web3 made NFTs, JPEGs, not copy-pastable, created scarcity in a visual object, you can create scarcity in a piece of code. And that can let that piece of code get owned by the people who contributed and built it without having any need for venture funding or studios, just hobbyists building together. And that's what's happening in Dark Forest. And you likely haven't heard of it because it is just hobbyists building it together, right? They don't have a marketing budget. The only people who hear about it are, crypto nerds who get nerd sniped by this thing.
Pretty much Lost Relics as well.
They respect getting nerd sniped by this thing. So unlike games like, and this is what I was studying in university, Skyrim or Little Big Planet, which depend on suckering players into building levels so that the value of the game can grow, and then capturing that value and not redistributing it to the players, but to investors and the core dev team. So it's not like that, right? It's not an exploitation of labor. Here we can have a game protocol that depends on the players building it, but where the proceeds can go back to those players. That's an interesting switch, right? Because we all love user-generated content. We just wish the generators of that content could get fairly compensated for it. And it does happen. Like,
okay,
again, Dota, I'm a big fan.
Couple things here. So, okay. Where do I even start? Okay, so he starts off by saying, that, he said a little while ago in the discussion, he was talking about how these games, that they're really not games, that crypto games aren't really games, and that, the idea about play to earn was like a ludicrous idea that never really held any weight, especially with Axie Infinity. But to also be fair, he just said that, Dark Forest is a game where pretty much the users of the game can be paid, to create, to play. We are talking about play to earn. It's the same thing. It's just for the different context of, in this case, what is the player doing and from his perspective, the player is creating value for all other players, which is a very fair point. But I just think that that's something that can be done across many different types of games, not just this individual type of game that he brought up here. So there's that case. Also, why? Well, I'll go ahead and let him continue here, and then we'll come to it.
The pros who play at the International, like I pay $15 for a battle pass. I get to watch them play professionally. They get some amount of that $15. The developers get some amount of that $15. They're laborers, those pros. And they labor for Dota. They make the game more valuable by playing it. And in the same way, Dark Force takes on that kind of role. To give you a sense, just before we go on a little bit more of what Dark Force is, it's basically Galcon, if you've ever played that. Like, take over a planet makes energy, send that energy to another planet. Now you got 2 planets making energy. Send those 2 planets to one bigger one, capture 3 planets, exponential growth of just like moving
go up
across the map. What's cool about Dark Force, though, is it's played in zero knowledge. What that means is every move you make in this giant world is provably true in how you craft it and present it to the blockchain, but no one knows what you did. It's like playing chess in the dark. Only once you shine your lights on the spot where that move happened can you see what happened there for real. That's an interesting feature, right? Because there's no central server to handle Fog of War, right? It's a decentralized on-chain game. No one owns the protocol, so there's no like database where I can look up, hey, what's under this Fog of War? You have to create Fog of War in totally new ways, which is very interesting to see cryptographic primitives do that.
Yeah, it's what's interesting is that the concept of like you are creating the concept of a fog of war that we are very used to in games, but you're doing it through a non-gameplay. Well, yeah, you're doing it through the blockchain. You're doing it through the blockchain. You're using. I don't know if you would want to. Is it in? I mean, it is. You're using a potential benefit of this zero knowledge technology. To be able to derive an interesting gameplay feature from, which I think is probably going to be how we differentiate like the real true blockchain games that explode. They're going to have these elements that can't be recreated in any other way than through using a blockchain, which is why that was a very fascinating concept, I thought. So I'll let him continue here.
And what that means is because there's no central database, there's no core team with superior powers over the game compared to, say, like any other competitive video game where devs can have like a back-end access and knowledge. Winning in this game is fair. It's provably fair, right? You just followed the protocol's rules. And so what the game community does is it awards prizes to the winners. And those prizes are just like NFTs, just like commemorative badges. And they're commemorative NFTs on
So you're playing to earn
again,
NFTs.
No environmental impact on this chain. And it gets us to the top 63. We've never seen a level 5, 6, or 7 planet, which are the biggest ones, get sold. But they sell for about $15,000 to $40,000, the smaller ones. I think a big one would sell for $1 million today. Because they're really hard to win at this game, right? This is like an enormous amount of engineering power to come first. You need to have like a good team working round the clock for weeks. And it's sort of like a nerd competition, similar to like a math Olympiad winning this game, which I think is kind of cool. Provable credentials for the team that wins. They're able to solve a bunch of cryptographic problems and think deeply about it. At the same time, it's like still very playable for any novice who wants to just like struggle through like a bit of crypto learning. OK, so in addition to these players winning planets for winning the game, they'll also get rewarded planets for revealing their strategies for how they won. Because often players do crazy things. The winner in round 1 rewrote the client of the game. So the whole front end, like they took the open source code and then found the places where there were awaits in move making, and instead of serializing the moves, just parallelized them, and was able to just make more moves faster in changing the code. In round 2, the team that won, we don't know what they did. But in round 1, for having revealed the new client, they want an additional planet. And that's really cool because now you're paying your players to share their improvements on the game with everyone else as a community. So in round 3, we made like a marketplace so that in-game you could trade your like strategic weapons. There was no marketplace in the game before. The community made the marketplace. The people who made the community, they got a commemorative NFT. The NFTs have no value, right? They're freely given, but the community ascribes them value through their cachet.
Yeah,
like if you have one of these planets, it's because you were pretty cool and did something pretty cool at some point. And I would like to buy it from you, not only because I think it's a valuable planet, but I know I'm funding someone who's building in Web3 at the cutting edge, right? I feel good about what I'm buying because the people making this game are like only working on donations, right? They like A16Z will come up to them at dinner with like a $10 million check at any valuation they want, and they're just like, no. Like this belongs to the community, and that's a very different approach, right, in thinking about this.
Yeah, it's very different, definitely a very different approach.
So where does this take us, right? What is the point of Web3 games?
Well, before he goes into the next phase of his discussion, I think it's important to say here that since we're so new into this into development of this new genre of video games, or what, I don't know if you want to call it a genre. I think it's pretty. I think you might understand it if that's how I were to phrase it. But I guess the thing that I would definitely say is that there are some areas of video games that do seem like they fit this type of model better than others. So one of them, obviously, I would say would be this idea of a loot, a action RPG genre where loot is dropping from dungeons, aka Lost Relics, or Big Time, or any other of the major games. Like I think it just fits naturally with this idea of item ownership, of the strengths of cryptocurrency, and can play to it. That's why I think that's why Lost Relics was one of the major games that I originally got into from the very beginning. Not the only game, but obviously my largest participation, both monetarily and time wise. So I do think that's one. I think another huge aspect that would fit perfectly with Web3 Gaming, which is an item he just brought up, which is this idea of user-generated content. And the reason why is the way he says it right now is like, where does the value get derived? In this world, in a world where not only the game developers are creating value for players, but where players are creating value for other players, that is extremely intriguing. To the point where this is more than likely going to be one of the areas that blockchain gaming will explode in, because like now you're having the player base and the developer both creating value for this entire world, and it's something that we might get to see at least within this game when it comes to like Dreamscape, right? So Dreamscape has the potential to allow players to create this content and thus create value. Players could then, it just depends on how it gets developed going forward, or how other systems and other games develop. But if a player is able to create value and add value to the ecosystem, then there can also be the possibility of those players to be able to extract some of that value from themselves and allow for some of that value to remain within the ecosystem, for others to build off of going further, and again, continuing the business cycle of adding value to the entire economy, to the entire ecosystem. So I do think that has a very strong future in blockchain gaming, along with a bunch of other key items. So let's keep going here.
From this angle, because it's hard
also,
to make
guys,
money
if
with
there's
it.
any parts of this conversation, whether I'm bringing up a topic or whether he's bringing up a topic, if there's something you like strongly agree with or disagree with, post it in the chat. We have the freedom to pause and be able to cover it. Block Menace Mafia jumping in on YouTube. Thank you, my friend. Hope you enjoy it here. We're just going to continue on with the video and give you my thoughts on it as we go.
It's hard to build a new community there's no way you can scale this, right? Like these players here, like you can only handle about 1,000 players at a time, maybe 2,000 at best. And then you'd have to like work on new blockchains. And like when this game does play, the entire blockchain shuts down. Like there's no way to use it. You have to pay huge fees to get past the game in order to like get your transactions through. And that's one of the fundamental problems with Web3 games. So it won't be a
scalability,
right? It'll be a niche community of super engineers who maybe are building up their CVs in the way that like people build their CVs with GitHub repos.
Yeah, but I mean, when you also think of it, doesn't need to be a huge retail success for it to have an extreme amount of value. For example, NASA is an organization with very few employees, but they are all extremely knowledgeable in their fields of expertise, and they're able to create immense value. I mean, going back to 1969, like a great wonder of the world, I guess you could say, maybe not wonder of the world exactly, but being able to land on the moon, humanity taking the next step forward in its exploration of space. Like a group of the most trained and educated engineers across the world came together, created this thing that has immense value, whether it's financially or socially or morally or however you want to put it. But there is value there, and we can all agree on that. So a game or a group of people, even if it is niche, is able to create massive amounts of value if the cards play out correctly.
So not thoroughly exciting in that way. If they're going to be valuable, these kinds of games, they're going to do different things than what normal games do. They're going to stress test new blockchains. They're going to be training grounds for new engineers. They're going to be credentials for CVs. They're not going to be these new fun times that reach 40 million players. It's just like not possible to put on-chain games to 40 million players, which is sad. It's like a sad truth, like really a big bummer. I'm sad about it every day, actually. Instead, we're going to see a lot more of this. Right? A lot more games that rely on some centralized organization, running a normal Web2 game, and then pushing some data to the chain to get some financialization of players.
But why is that? Why are we going to get more games like that and less games like he was previously discussing? I'm trying to remember the name of the game right now. Dark Forest? Is that what it's called? I'm completely blanking right now. But like, why? Like it's because there are hurdles to this technology that we need to overcome. And right now, the only ways that we really know how to overcome them is through centralized forces. How do you balance a game? Like, how does a group, like, for example, if Lost Relics or any game really was just taken over by the community, like we would have hundreds of people just spitting ideas about what should be the next thing that the community should build. How do we come to consensus? How do we all agree? How do we know that what we're building, is the thing that is going to be right for it in the future? So on and so forth, right? So this is the reason why you have this like concept of centralized power, so that somebody can make the decision and be able to move forward rather than us just being stuck in limbo, talking about ideas back and forth forever and ever.
That's the fundamental premise here. This is just way more popular. We're going to get way more of it. And these games are serving as user acquisition to their underlying blockchains. So what's good for Axie is they own the blockchain they're acquiring users to. But when I go downstairs and look at all the booths of all the people who are making games on someone else's blockchain, I get really worried. Because I don't know how you're going to capture the value. Maybe through a wallet that will like start taking fees at the wallet level. But certainly the people who are going to capture the value are the blockchains that are under that level, right? And so if you are making one of these games, make sure you talk to that blockchain and you ask for a lot of money, because you're doing them a huge service. And
well, this is definitely the case. Like right now, the gaming, there was just a report a week ago, 2 weeks ago by CoinDesk that was coming out that was saying that 50% or an estimated 50% of all the blockchain activity that is happening, on chain is through games. whether it's Axie, Million on Mars, like Lost Relics. And why is that? It's because like players in games are making more financial transactions by playing the inherent nature of playing the game than someone is by holding Bitcoin and trading it once a month or once a year, or just hodling and never doing anything on the chain. Creation of NFTs, using NFTs, selling NFTs, transferring all this stuff. That's where all the activity is coming from, and the people that are playing games are the ones that are the most incentivized to do those transactions. This is where the value is coming. Now, I actually kind of, when he says this, I actually got a different feeling. I actually felt the exact opposite of what he just said. Like for example, we know for a fact, and we both agree on this, that the value that the games are creating is the value. I mean, a major value that games are creating is onboarding new players onto these blockchains, so that these blockchains become bigger ecosystems. So in other words, like the games are the gatekeepers, and so like the question is, these games are so valuable to bringing people into these new ecosystems that they could charge a fee to get to open the gate. They could charge. I mean, they can monetize that that service that they provide, and it would still be extremely worth it to pay it to get in. So like, for example, if we talk about Engine and Lost Relics, like Lost Relics is by far the #1 game right now on Engine. And there is a value that Lost Relics is bringing to Engine, and there's also a value that Engine is bringing to Lost Relics. The argument he's making right now is that the value that Lost Relics brings to Engine is significantly more than the value that Engine provides Lost Relics. So like, when I think of the value that Engine provides, is like the wallet, the Nginx, JumpNet, and the APIs that let you as a developer be able to bring in NFTs into your game. Those are, wallets are a dime a dozen. There will be hundreds and hundreds of wallets. So I would say that value in the long term is less and less and less every day. JumpNet, same type of logic, and even seeing it now, depending on how much importance Engine puts on it, means what level of service or quality or value a customer or a developer will get out of it. And so we can all see that. I would say it's much more valuable for Engine to be promoting games that will onboard people to their ecosystem. And if they don't do that, there will be another blockchain that will be willing to offer those incentives to game developers, that will make the game developer's life easier. Going back like 1-2 years ago, no, 1 year, that's too much. Maybe 8 months ago, I remember having multiple conversations with different developers about like the concept of like, hey, right now the funding for crypto Web3 games is huge. It's huge for a reason. It's because it is that funding is worth it to be able to onboard people into these new systems, and that's what your game is doing. That's what a game is doing. That is so valuable that they will pay you to be on their system the same way Xbox or PlayStation pays for exclusives. And I don't think it's a coincidence that all of these major acquisitions in traditional gaming were happening at the same time, when people are all paying for like influencers to onboard people onto products, game developers to build on whatever platform. Like, all of these different funding mechanisms inside crypto right now is so that someone will pay someone else to build on their platform. And the very few exceptions are pretty much Bitcoin and Ethereum. If you're building on Bitcoin, like building the Lightning Network, you're likely not being paid for that. You're not being funded for that. If you're building an app on Ethereum, only on Ethereum, not on a layer 2, not on a blockchain, not on a ERC20 token within Ethereum, on Ethereum, then you're not being paid to do those things. You're doing it simply because the value of being part of that network exceeds the value that you would be paid by being a part of another network. The same logic about it. You like as a game developer, you have to make a calculation. if you're going to get paid $1 million to go on Xbox Live, is that $1 million worth more or less than the amount of money you would make by selling your game on all platforms? If you're a new indie developer and you don't know how well your game will sell, or you don't know how much work or effort you're going to have to put in to be able to create your baby, then taking a deal like selling exclusivity rights to these major platforms is a good deal. It reduces the amount of risk that you take on because you don't know how much time you're going to need, how much money you're going to need, and that eliminates those two problems. In return, you don't get the full amount of sales that you would get by going on all platforms, but you get guaranteed funds. It's the same logic here. And it is exactly what's happening with crypto games. And so what I think is interesting is, and one of the things that I've been doing is I've been paying attention to all these different funding rounds by Animoca Brands, by A16Z, by IMX, by GameStop, everybody that is paying or providing a fund for developers to build. I've been watching how all of those have been playing out, paying attention to valuations, so that I can understand how the major players in the space right now are valuing everything. Which is why I'm wanting to create more of this content for you guys on my end. Now, some of you may want me to shut up and just talk Lost Relics, but like I think that these topics are so important that they will affect not only this game, but all games and how we proceed into the future. We had this conversation a year ago too, when we were talking about Axie again. We were talking about Axie's launching a token, and we had other content creators who would come in here and start criticizing about whether Lost Relics should or should not create a token. Turns out, in retrospect, actually it may have been better to not do that. For legal reasons, for financial reasons, for adoption reasons, you know, and Axie is the one who paved that way. Whether or not creating SLP was the right thing or was the wrong thing, I think will be different at different points in time. So we'll have to see how it goes.
That's something that I do for the companies I help, right? So this is me again. What I do in real life is I run an accelerator for Web3 games. I help game companies stop making games on Web3 or help Web2 companies start making games in Web3, depending on the use cases and what they need. So it's so hard to get it through in one chat, but basically we have guilds who are managing thousands of players now because those players are playing to earn in these sort of pyramid schemes, and they're able to take wealth out. Those guilds help connect them to players, and to game makers. I maintain a large collection of those. Also, the studios that are in charge of game making, or the entities that are in charge of game making at all the layer ones, so like Solana, Celo, Algorand, whatever, the whole list, Terra, maintain relationships with those, trying to get people who are in this space to safely and not scammily, hopefully, as best as we can, try and make things like this. That's the sort of state of the industry for now. Look, I want to leave a lot of room for questions. The sort of possibility space of where this talk can go will be very long, and I'll give really long-winded answers to your questions, hopefully. So if you do have any, please feel free to ask.
Same here, guys. Now's the time to post it in chat. We're going into the Q&A portion of this discussion.
Test. All right. Hey, thanks. This was a really insightful talk. It helped me a lot. One of the things that I've been trying to wrap my head around is whether blockchain offers something that databases don't, like a standard database doesn't offer, to a company like Microsoft or a major game publisher. Why would they choose, for example, to try to, I don't know, put the Arbiter's sword in the hands of a Call of Duty player using blockchain as opposed to a database of some sort? It doesn't seem to me like it makes any sense. Like, why would you do that? But anyway, that's my question.
That's an excellent question. And the reason it doesn't make sense is because it doesn't make sense for the most part. So
It doesn't make sense because it doesn't make sense.
To make centralized blockchains over the last 7 or 8 years, enterprise blockchains we call them. It's sort of ridiculous because the point of a blockchain, right, was to make a uncensorable, right, like government fighting machine. And as soon as you centralize it, then the government can just lean on the company that's centralizedly owning it and say stop, and it's over. So as soon as you centralize a blockchain, there's every benefit that it could have had from allowing people to guarantee certain things about their NFTs not moving or changing, gone out the window. So there's literally zero reason for a centralized blockchain, like none. If Microsoft can somehow get a decentralized consortium of people that's so decentralized that a government couldn't stop it, then you enable regulation circumvention. You enable things like what we call regulatory arbitrage, finding opportunities against Web2 companies because they have to follow the rules that Web3 companies don't. But the thing is, Microsoft's a publicly traded company. So if it starts to break any kind of rules, it's going to be in deep trouble. And it has a lot of money to pay fines. And so it's a good target to go after. So I would be very nervous about seeing as something like that. I do think that the disruptors in this industry will not be like classic Web2 companies. They'll be companies that can take a lot more regulatory risk, at least for the near foreseeable future. And then, so then a normal database is great. Take that sword from this dragon game and put it in this gun game. Like, that's cool. And make your database publicly available and open API and let people come in and use it and have other people use that item and build a marketplace in Web2. Like, you can build all these normal things. So the only other real reason is that it might be cheaper. Like, there's so much free work being done in Web3, so much open source code available. You can just use that infrastructure, even though it's like fundamentally worse and wasn't made for this purpose, as a sort of leapfrog cheat and not have to build anything yourself. I can see sometimes like a really operational reason like that be there. Hey.
Yes, I'm honestly still kind of confused on the value of like some of the.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, it's correct. This idea that he's bringing up is the idea about like companies are creating their own blockchains. And the analogy I would make is that like a company trying to create its own private blockchain is kind of like how companies used to create intranet and thinking that intranet, so a network within the company so that people can communicate within the company, that does create value. But there's no way that that value would ever would ever be equal to the value that the internet, not intranet, internet can, because of the idea of so many network participants all bringing value to the same thing that you're using. So like, if Amazon has 100 million employees, that intranet will be valuable, but it's nowhere going to be valuable as an internet that has 5 billion participants in it, and that's the same logic. Your blockchain is valuable because of the benefits that it provides with immutability, censorship, resistance. That's what the value is, but that value is exponentially increased by the fact that you have more and more and more people using it. You can have a little blockchain that is still valuable. It just will never compare to a large, open, decentralized network in terms of the total value that can be assessed from it. Now that kind of goes against, I guess, the traditional mindset of creating value for corporations, which is that you create value by being the single owner or single service provider of whatever you do. That's not going to be the strategy that is going to win out in this case.
These NFTs, just taking the example up here.
Oh yeah, here.
So
what is the value of
you own
NFTs is
these
the question.
Characters on that particular blockchain, which sounds like the blockchain itself is owned by a company.
Yeah.
Even if the blockchain survives, if the game were to shut down, right? Where does the value come from, right? The fact that you own these characters, but the game itself is gone.
Sure. So my argument is that the company has value, not these assets. These assets actually have gone down in value dramatically. I bought these with company dollars. Sorry, company, for $2,000, I think. I think they're worth like $300 today. These objects are loss leaders to getting more players onto a platform that can do all of this. If you get players to use your app as the front end to finance, especially when those players come from a world where they don't have access to banking, lending, trading, swapping, leveraging, shorting, you get to be the owner of all the fees they're going to pay. The lifetime value of your players is huge, and so the company that made this game owns those players, owns the front end those players have to this unregulated financial sector, and those players don't live in the USA, where there's an enormous amount of regulation. They live in places where you can actually get around a lot of these problems. And so that's why there's a lot of value that can be captured, right? When people valued these at $2,000, the reason was really weird. So you'll have to bear with me as I do with my hands. So imagine a world where there's 3 axes only, because that's what you need to field a team. Okay, but we'll call those 3 axes 1 axis for the sake of my model. There's 1 axis. And this axis makes SLP, smooth love potions. That's the currency in the game. If it plays the single player campaign, it gets some smooth love potions. If you want to make another axis, you'll need a certain amount of smooth love potions and breed your axis. If I want my friend to play, I need to give them smooth love potions or breed them an axis. They're scarce. They're a limited number. The protocol sort of limits the number. So that smooth love potion, right, scarcity, leads to an increase in value of smooth love potion. Now my friend doesn't want to play that badly. You know, maybe he'll buy it for $2, right? But someone hears, wait a second, you played this game for a day and made $2, right, playing? That's crazy. I want an axis too. But now, okay, 2 or 3 people want to do this, the price has gone up because demand has gone up and the supply of axes is still really constrained. So now there's, $3 for an axis. Some new people here, $3 a day, that's 50% better. 10 people want to play now. Because there's 10, demand spikes, value of an axis spikes in the market. And what happens is this crazy funnel problem happens where these things spiked to hundreds or thousands of dollars as there was not enough supply to meet demand. And because they were so expensive, demand grew because people thought you could make more money with them. But like a pyramid scheme, eventually you reach a point where the number of axes is growing exponentially because each one you make can make more. And the number of players coming in isn't growing as exponentially. There's a sort of stop where we have huge amounts of inflation of axes, and then the price just goes as close to 0 as it can over time. So they don't have value, right? They have a limited value through people who miscalculate where they are in the pyramid, right? That's very dangerous, right? And you want to protect players and kids from like huge mistakes in their financial decision making. So yeah.
Okay, so I got to push back on that. For sure, I mean, there's no question that they have value. Actually, when he's saying that they don't have value, I think what he really is trying to say is they don't have the value that people ascribe them to have. They have significantly less. I think that's what he's trying to say. Because he even said it to begin with. He said they used to be 2,000 and now they're 300. Well, if they still are 300, there's still value. It's just the value is a lot less. So the point he's trying to get across here is that they don't have the value that people are ascribing. So the thing here is that we all know that value is subjective. The same way that you describe like how whether we're talking about scarcity, whether we're talking about a whole number of different things, like these items have value for different reasons. How much value? That's the question. So like one example of value added is collectability. Obviously, there is value to owning an item, whether it's a CryptoPunk or whether it is a Lost Relics NFT or whether it is a piece of cosmetic gear in Fortnite. There is value there. Okay. Just under the idea of being able to collect them. there's value added from utility. What are you able to do with them other than play? You can play the game. If you own them, are you able to rent them? Are you able to earn staking rewards? Are you able to lend them? Are you able to use them to acquire other items? There's a lot of different aspects. I mean, the big ones, like I was saying, collectability, scarcity, utility, and in some cases, the ability to lend, the ability to borrow, the ability to rent. All of those add up to what a price of an item can be worth. And it's going to be subjective depending on the person. So if I'm able to play Axie or play any game with an NFT, but I'm inherently a better player naturally than you are, then in my hands, that NFT is more valuable than in your hands. Same logic can be applied for professional sports. You can give me the most expensive Major League wooden bat that ever exists, but the value that I'm able to get out of that bat will never be comparable to someone like a Mike Trout or a Mickey Mantle or a Babe Ruth, like major Hall of Fame players that are just inherently more skilled than I am in this game. But games don't necessarily need to be balanced for 100% fairness. There's plenty of games that we play that are inherently not fair. Like take the battle royale genre of games. You dropping into a portion of the map that may or may not have better loot than the rest of the competitors on the map that you have no knowledge of, that inherently is not a fair system, but it is a game that everybody significantly enjoys. Okay, there are other games too that are much more fair, like chess. Even though chess in its nature isn't 100% fair, I don't know if there is a game that can be 100% fair. Maybe flipping a coin, if the coin is perfectly balanced, 50-50 between one and another person. I don't know. I'm sure there's examples. But we play games all the time that are inherently not fair and enjoy them dramatically. I like to do the comment about there is not a salary cap in baseball, which means that the richer teams are able to pay better prices for talent, which means they theoretically should have a better team. The same argument that developers make, or Cliff has made also, about pay to win, which is like, you can go out, if we're playing a race here, you can go out and pay for the most expensive, fastest car ever. But if you as a driver are not talented enough to be able to get that thing across the platform in first place, it really doesn't matter. You're not winning anything, right? So these concepts are all subjective. And so you as a player or as an investor or as an owner have to weigh not only your opinions on these things, but the general opinions of the entire space to see if your logic will match up to your purchase and then make it worth it for you as an individual. And I got to make sure that I don't die here because I'm so close to the end and I don't want to burn a potion. So, and I think we just finished it. There we go. Let's continue with the Q&A.
No value there, value in owning the front end, in the same way that Facebook is like the internet for many people, right? Where the Facebook app is their like interface to the internet. Facebook owns those people, owns their marketplace, or the way WeChat in China owns all the marketplaces of the people using it. Axie will be a super app. It'll be your social media network, it'll be your bank, etc. And so this is a loss leader Ponzi scheme that attracts lots of players. I think that's the way to have the mental model. Does that make sense? Yep. Great.
I just
over here.
wouldn't go as far as calling all Ponzi schemes because it implies intent.
You're saying that the value of these NFTs or these tokens in general are basically, they don't exist. And the only value is to the company who initially started and fronted the whole thing because they get the profit immediately, and then it eventually all of these just lose.
Yeah, sorry, I'll clarify that. So the company actually made no money off these NFTs almost. These NFTs, when you make the SLP and create the Axie and sell it,
player to
player, you get 95% of the profits for what you sold it for. And the players were the ones creating them. That's what created the economic flywheel and the incentive to play in the first place. They just took a 5% cut of the sale.
Sure, okay, so then my follow-up would be like, so then what is, I guess, the overall purpose of adding these in the first place? If it's just like artificially essentially generating like a small amount of income before it disseminates again, and there was no point in it in the first place.
Sorry, I didn't understand the question. Can you repeat it again?
So the way it sounded like was, and maybe I misunderstood, was the value you're getting from these tokens that you made are like very small, and then it's only given to like, set amount of players at the beginning or something, and then slowly over time, even these don't have value anymore. So then what was the purpose of like adding this extra, like a lot of effort actually to like integrating this into your game?
Right. So
I mean, the same reason you create a video game in
it was
the first place.
Like a multi-level marketing scheme. So it's a go-to-market user acquisition strategy. So if I tell you you can play this game and make $100 a day, you will download this app and you will play it for $100 a day.
100%.
Like a huge number of people, or $300 a month. I think that's what it was at its maximum. And so people actually weren't buying the axes, it turns out, because they couldn't afford them. They were too expensive. So these organizations called guilds went out, bought the axes, and then lent them to players to play for money, and took a cut of that money and gave the rest to the players. And the players just made money playing. Money that was brought in from new players coming in wanting to play. But at a certain point, they weren't new players, they were just new businesses. Like taxi cab medallions. Like I'm a company that owns medallions. I lend the medallions out to my drivers who go and drive for money, and then I take a cut. Now, those guilds ended up holding a lot of axes that dropped a lot in value, especially the later ones. They sort of got cleaned out. But what happened is those guilds were like, oh my God, this is profitable. Like I buy an axie, I get a player to play this game, and now I make money and that player makes money. And all of a sudden you have a company that didn't have a marketing team, didn't need a marketing team to acquire new players, right? Cottage industries emerged to acquire new players for them. So they went from having like 200,000 players to like 5 million players in the span of a month on this kind of model. So why? User acquisition, that's the why. Because the pyramid entices people to come join thinking they're going to make money. And the same reason, why do people join normal pyramid schemes? They think they're going to make money. And in this case, they did, because the people who lost the money weren't the players for the most part. They were these guilds that did it.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. I've been meaning to do a lot of research on like
a few of the things
how the guilds were like impacted, like if we could view it by the numbers.
Interoperability and the ownership components. I was just wondering how you factor interoperability into your mental model, thinking about these as funneling users to DeFi.
Sure, that's a great question. So just to clarify, interoperability is this powerful concept, right? Because this ledger is open, right? Anybody can read what you're holding as assets, right? The Steam marketplace is interoperable. For a while, you could even like gamble with your like CS:GO skins on like gambling websites because the API was so interoperable and powerful. So the interoperability isn't novel to crypto. We can have it anywhere we want. It's default in crypto, so that's one thing. The other thing is
I like the way he put that. It's default in crypto.
Interoperability is also a promise that keeps getting unfulfilled. So if I'm a game developer that makes money selling NFTs, and now I've made that money, it's strange to think there'll be another game developer who will use the NFTs I made the money on, right? Like they make them passes to their game. The answer could be they want to siphon off my players.
Yes,
right? Say,
exactly.
hey, if you hold this NFT, here's a cool perk in this other game.
So excited there.
And so it can be a way to user acquire. Say, people who own this asset, come to me, I'll give you a reward. That might be why. The other cool thing, though, beyond interoperability, and this is
yeah, and just to comment on what got me excited there is like, because I've been thinking about this for a long time. It's been like when we saw how SushiSwap decided to launch its coin based on the users of Uniswap. We were pretty much saying they were pretty much saying, hey, look, we're gonna quote unquote vampire attack you. We're going to incentivize your customers to come over here. It would be the same thing if we said like PlayStation said, hey, if you have an Xbox Live account, we will give you a discount or we will give you whatever for playing the new God of War or whatnot. Like it's just a method of trying to acquire users from another ecosystem. And that is a very predatory type of practice, right? It's a zero-sum game. In order for me to win, you have to lose, okay? Which I think in general, while it will be extremely useful and we're going to see more and more and more of it, it is going to be, it's going to be interesting to watch play out because, like, I don't think the largest games in the world will win the trust of its users and its players by using that type of strategy. I think there will be a lot of successes. Like, I'm surprised, like, for example, like one of the things I was thinking of is like when the crypto project Loot was created, this idea of like the developer coming out and just dropping a bunch of NFTs that have a list of loot on them. Like, when I saw that, I was just like, okay, well, who's going to be the first game that says, hey, if you own this NFT, my game will read it and you will be awarded an item in this game. It's the same way that Engine works, which is like, if your NFT can be written on the blockchain, you are then rewarded with an item in the game. So like, an easy way to attract players that spent hundreds of dollars on these loot NFTs would just be, say, like, give them interoperability. You want to access that community, you could easily say, hey, look, if you own a loot NFT and the game and I program my game to be able to read the blockchain for those NFTs, then you would be rewarded with a cosmetic or with a sword and a bow in Lost Relics. Like, it's the idea of being able to acquire users by the NFTs that were already created that you as a developer did not create. And that is, I think, an extremely powerful incentive mechanism. But I don't think that it will be, I think there will be more powerful ones. Like the idea here about what Engine was trying to create with the metaverse, which was there will be universal Engine NFTs that part of the Engine multiverse. And these games would be able to be interoperable and usable across all the games that are inside the Engine platform. Like, that's a great idea. That's a great idea because in this scenario, game developers that are technically competing with each other for customers don't have to worry about what other games will do with or without their NFTs. Everyone can focus as these being the multiverse items that customers can then or players can then jump from game to use, and it belongs to the head of the ecosystem, the top of the pyramid, which is Engine. That's a great idea. You know, the issue, we really haven't seen, unfortunately, that play out too much. There was the Swissborg event that happened a couple of years ago that was really interesting, but like in what other way are game developers incentivized to work together? Like when I think about it, I try to think like, why wouldn't Nine Lives Arena and Forest Night team up to say that, hey, your NFTs are usable in my game and mine are usable in yours? It's because you're taking on a whole lot of extra responsibility that technically isn't yours to bear. Like, if I'm making my game, I'm going to concentrate on making my game the best I can possibly make it. Why do I need to also worry about the stuff that you make, making sure it gets into my game and then it all works together and flows and is smoothless? Like, what is my incentive? Because players will be incentivized to leave my ecosystem and go to yours, and your players would come over here, and then we're competing for those players who would retain them. And then instead of working together and creating like a great partnership, now we're competing against each other at an even more in-depth level. I guess there is some security about, like, if you're the loser in that situation, you still could gain benefits from the growth of the other game. But like, when are we going to get to a point, or are we going to get to a point where developers are incentivized to work together? And what would those models look like? Those are my major questions. Okay, 10 more minutes left in the Q&A, maybe even less, and then we're probably going to wrap it up here. But let's continue forward.
A big part of DeFi is composability. So I like to think of interoperability as you can read data, but composability is you can activate logic. So like when you use Aave to borrow Maker, what you're doing is actually asking one program to activate the code in another program. And when programs start not just interoperating by reading their data, but using their logic across themselves, you might get an explosion of value. And that is what's happening in Dark Forest, right? The composability here, like for instance in round 4, we made a smart contract player in our guild. The player was just a piece of code. It couldn't really play the game, but what it could do is if you gave it a planet, it would cash out its points and give the planet back. And we had like 54 strangers, I think, like give this planet, this smart contract their planets. It cashed out their points, then kept track of how many points they each gave it. And then when it came 33rd on its own, with the help of these other players, it could then like give that NFT to them pro rata for the points they gave, right? So that's really powerful, composability. Interoperability is less interesting and also more possible, whereas composability is really hard in Web 2. Like, it's hard to use the logic of Dota in another game. Like, I don't know how you would get past the walled garden, if that makes sense. Over here.
Yep, thank you for the great talk. So it sounds like you've described this life cycle of those games like Axie, where everything is great at the beginning, more people start joining, and eventually it collapses, right? Do you think that's just like forever what's going to be, or do you think there's a way out of this cycle?
Good question.
Great question. There's a way to make your pyramid longer so that it explodes later. You can tweak the economics that way. It means giving up less money earlier. There are ways to, look, here's what it is. Axie was paying players to play alone in their basements. That makes no sense.
No.
Because you're not creating value.
Well, I mean, yes. It's both. My bad. I shouldn't have stopped it there. He's about to get to some really good points about like what is the value in video games. So let me get back to it once I kill this elite. My bad.
Value when you play alone. Here's what it is. Axie was paying players to play alone in their basements. That makes no sense. Because you're not creating value when you play alone in your basement or outside. You create value when you bring new players in. You create value when you Twitch stream. You create new value when you run an esports tournament and people pay to watch it, right? You create value when you build a mod and people like to play with it. And if you create value, Web3 can capture it and redistribute it. That's a powerful feature of Web3. In the case of Axie, by giving out value for things that weren't creating, it's an unsustainable model. It's like Uber paying you every time you take a cab ride. It doesn't make sense. But Uber did pay you when you brought a new user onto the platform. That does make sense. So as long as you can make sure that the value coming in is greater than the value going out, then you can maybe guess that it's a sustainable model. I think that's a fair way to think about it.
I mean, I would also...
Sorry, just real quick. But eventually you're going to run out of users, right? Like,
what?
Eventually you're going to run out of new users,
Yeah.
right?
You eventually run out of new users. So what you need is those users to start paying money.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I pay $15 to Dota to watch the international, right? Dota isn't paying me. It's paying the pros, right? So they keep getting paid money as long as new players are bringing in money. You have to capture value eventually. What's interesting about Axie is it can start capturing value in the financial instrument side and funnel that to the game side. The game could be the loss leader that you keep funding through other...
Yeah, which is the exact same type of thing with this economy, with the Lost Relics economy, which is like the fees that come from the player-to-player in-game blockchain Emporium transactions are what go to funnel the treasury, which is what increases the drop rate. It is what is responsible for dropping shadow stones while you play, and it is a mechanism. Now, I mean, and it is one of those things, right, where you do need to have more coming in than goes out in order to have a sustainable ecosystem. I wouldn't say that we're there yet with Lost Relics, and to be fair, I don't think any game has ever gotten there before. But it's the same type of concept that you could apply to a country. Like a country needs to have more coming in than it goes out to be able to fund services to its citizens. And we see cases all the time where governments fail, economic systems fail, and it's just, I guess, a part of the very nature of economic systems. So this problem isn't inherent to games. The question is just how are games going to evolve to create these models that allow for continued growth and progression.
Other ways of capturing value because it's part of a rich ecosystem that boggles the mind of a normal game maker, right? Because you're never a game maker and a bank, and then all of a sudden that's what we're expecting you to be.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Hey, my pleasure.
Hello.
That was a bad use of the mist.
In terms of the overall con that you're describing, that
not a con.
Games are UA to be on these blockchains, and then essentially people that don't have banks have banks. So the overall con about
it's not a con. You're providing services.
Isn't that how technology in general?
Yeah, exactly. That's how Google works. That's how Uber works.
To users. But they want your data. That's how they make their money. They're not expecting you to pay and get you to make money. Amazon, you can buy things really easily from them. And it's convenient. And so you use them primarily for how you consume and make your shops. But they're not making money from the products you're purchasing. They're gathering your data and then using that data to feed all of the side businesses that they create. It just seems that it's expected that blockchains will have this secondary value, which is the primary value for them, by having games using their blockchain.
Right. So.
Right. Yeah.
And so that's exactly what I'm saying.
Okay.
I think you
that's
got
correct.
it. So if you're just making the game part, that's like just making the social media platform without any of the ads part, right? Like,
it's not a business.
Yeah. You need to have a second source of revenue. Otherwise, there's no reason to make it on chain anyway in the first place. Like, you should just make a Web2 game and create value just through fun. What's happening here is Axie's creating value by doing user acquisition, right? So it's not about data here. It's about, it could eventually be about data.
It's about the services you can provide your players.
This huge friction barrier of getting people into Web3. Because once you get a Web3 user, they're worth so much money. So yeah, I think it's expected when you think critically, but people aren't thinking critically about this. People really thought, like you could read these articles, they really thought Axie had solved.
Remember that, we're going to come back to the end.
Income. Like the entire global south was just going to play video games and make a living for the rest of their lives. I seriously, like nonstop could hear this, and I was just like, why do you believe this? The laws of physics.
Well, I mean,
so that's what I'm iterating here, I guess.
Yeah, I think Axie is one of the examples in the space, and I think there is a difference when you have game designers who are experienced in building game economies that they could find a way to make it where the financial play of it is just another aspect of fun and not. I don't think everyone believed that play to earn is just a thing and you can live off making games. I think there's a percentage that believe that. I don't know. Do you think that everyone just expected to?
Well, I mean, that's the case. It isn't that everyone is going to be able to do this. It's not even that there's a lot of people that are able to do it right now. What it is it's the trend. How many more people are able to quote unquote make a living or quote unquote earn inside these metaverse games? It's not about, like, if you only have 100 players that are able to actually extract any type of value from a game, like that number of 100 means nothing. It's too small to be of any consequence. But what is important is that if that number is growing at a rate of 30 to 50% every single year, then you start to see that, oh, wait, what's going to happen in 10 years? What's going to happen when these things start to hit mass adoption or blah, blah, blah. I mean, we only have an estimated somewhere between like 1.5 and 3 million crypto gamers right now playing blockchain games. And that was probably at the peak. I wouldn't be surprised if we're down to about 1 million right now in general. But like these players this number is continuously growing. So my question to you is, what will the world look like when this number reaches a 10x milestone from now? That I think is the true question about what's happening and where we're going, if you could answer that.
During the hype phase, it was pretty intense, and then it went from play to earn to play and earn, and like people are changing the message as they learn it and figure out what works. But yeah,
Exactly.
like there are games where the economy is the fun, for sure. Like EVE Online is.
Yeah,
like a great
exactly. Yeah, I was thinking that.
Yeah, and there's a great book, by the way, called Virtual Economies by Vili Ledon-Virta.
I just bought it.
It's
I'm going to
so
be
good.
reading it shortly.
And he talks about this, right? And that often game makers are going to give a little bit of currency to their players just so they can see the economic engine that's there and how enticing it is. So certainly there are blockchain games doing that. And as long as the loop is closed and there's no value bleeding out, like that can keep happening. But what's happening is these blockchain games, because they're on chain and they're interoperable and composable with all of DeFi, the tokens in that game are sellable. And if people are selling tokens, that means someone else is buying. And if they're buying because they want to make more money, in the way that like I buy milkshakes from the milkshake person above me in the pyramid, so I can sell more milkshakes to the people below me, like that will collapse. And so, yes, there's definitely a way to make a more sustainable economy. And hopefully we'll see them soon. But when you do, those sustainable economies are less viral, right? So they don't satisfy that purpose of loss leader for user acquisition.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your question.
I wanted to ask if blockchain games could be a good solution to have people play PvP for money, basically. So let's suppose Clash Royale, you go in and you bet
Sure.
$1 before the match, and the winner takes $1.9.
Yeah, that is a good use case because the game isn't on chain. The thing is, that's gambling. So there's a lot of laws you got to worry about. Even if it's like an entirely skill-based game, there are probably laws you have to worry about. Also, there's KYC problems, so you're not used to it, but like you don't want to fund terrorism through this channel of moving money, so you become like a virtual asset service provider or a money service business. So like
I've never heard of
it
the
is
first
doable.
term. The second term is quite common.
It's just you have to figure out what you're gaining over just $1, right? Like why not just put $1 in the account and move the dollar over? And if what you think you're gaining is regulatory arbitrage, the answer is probably no. You're probably not gaining much because you're exposing yourself to regulatory scrutiny.
I guess that's the big
I was
debate,
thinking of building that,
if that's correct or not.
In our PvP game, adding the ability to play, entering the room with tokens, then the winner takes like 90% of the tokens. The other 10% goes to fund esports tournaments and also the dev team and the expenses. But you say it's going to be a regulatory problem.
Yeah, I would say you're going to have a lot of regulatory problems.
What about skills?
What?
Skills is basically doing the cash-based tournaments.
Yeah, look, I mean, I'm not your lawyer. I can't tell you, but I'd be worried. I would just like it raises red. I think it's cool to explore it. I think it might be more efficient, especially if you want that gambling to use in-game tokens that are usable in your own economy and a more smooth thing. But particularly more efficient if that's going to be your way of onboarding users to financializing them. Right. If on top of letting them gamble, you also let them swap assets and then take fees on that, make more money that way.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. That's all we got for today, everybody. Thank you so much for attending. I really appreciate it.
All right. Yeah, and that's actually going to be where I call it as well. I was wanting to go over a second video with you guys, but I'm going to have to take off. We will watch the second video. This one, like I was saying earlier when we started, was pretty much I guess you could say the bearish view case on where cryptocurrencies are, where blockchain gaming is going. And I honestly don't think it's that bearish, to be quite honest. The terminology and the words that he used, I wouldn't have used, but the concepts were all strong, legitimate, good questions. I thought they were I thought it could give very good perspectives to be able to comment on with all of you all. So the next video that I'm going to want to watch is going to be a discussion with Animoca Brands, which is probably the leader right now in terms of Web3 gaming, at least when it comes to funding and investment. So they are really pushing the story forward. So it's going to be a good one for that. But I'm going to have to wrap up the stream here because I got to go. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Do me a favor and just go ahead and hit that like button or that follow button. If you're on Twitch right now, do me a quick favor and jump on over to YouTube. Show me a little love over there. Obviously, like we were saying over there, where's the value being created? If we're creating content, I'm creating content here, obviously, where we're talking about not only crypto, but we're talking about while we're playing Lost Relics, what it can mean for this game, what it can mean for other games, where I can, quote unquote, add that value for you all. And I hope you all enjoyed it. So for right now,